A team of archaeologists carefully combed through the desolate ruins of an alien city, their every step a mix of anticipation and trepidation. Dust clung to their suits as they ventured deeper into the massive complex. For years, this planet had been untouched, a graveyard for a long-dead civilization. The leader of the team, Dr. Morales, motioned for silence as they approached an enormous, sealed door, unlike anything they'd encountered before. "This could be it," she whispered, her voice crackling through the calms. "This might be where the war machines were kept." Rumors about the city's dark past had spread before the mission even began. The civilization that once thrived here had been known for creating terrifying biological weapons, war dogs, bred for combat and engineered to defend their creators against any threat. But no one knew for sure what happened to those creatures after their creators disappeared. The team worked quickly, deciphering the strange glyphs on the control panel next to the door. Finally, with a low rumble, the door slid open, revealing a vast, dark chamber. The air inside was stale, untouched by time. "What is that?" one of the scientists muttered, stepping forward. In the center of the room stood a massive, glass-like pod. Inside was something huge, something alive, something dangerous. The creature was curled up, its body twitching slightly as if dreaming. Its size alone was staggering, with metallic armor fused into its body, eyes closed, but glowing faintly with an eerie light. It was the war dog, asleep for centuries, preserved in a state of hibernation. "Is it still functioning?" someone asked, voice shaking. Before Dr. Morales could respond, a sudden spark erupted from the control panel they had been working on. Warning lights flashed across the chamber as the mechanisms controlling the pod began to activate. The war dog stirred, its massive form slowly unfurling. The scientists backed away, fear evident in their faces. "It's waking up!" another voice shouted, panic setting in. The war dog opened its glowing eyes, instantly locking onto the humans. Its growl was low, but it vibrated through the entire chamber, a sound that communicated one thing: danger. Without warning, it leaped from the pod, landing with a force that shook the ground. Everyone screamed, scrambling to retreat. The war dog let out a deafening roar, its sharp claws tearing into the metal floor beneath it. Its aggression was immediate, automatic, as if programmed to eliminate anything unfamiliar. Weapons were drawn, but no one dared fire, not yet. The creature's power was palpable, its muscles rippled under its armored hide, and its every movement was calculated, lethal. "Fall back! We need to contain it!" Dr. Morales yelled, trying to regain control of the situation. The war dog advanced, eyes flicking between the humans, assessing them as threats. It lunged at one of the soldiers, but a quick deployment of a force field stopped it in its tracks, though just barely. The creature slammed against the shield repeatedly, its fury growing with each failed attempt to reach the humans. It was clear this wasn't just a mindless beast. There was intelligence in its movements, a terrifying precision. The team knew it wasn't safe to remain here. "Evacuate the site!" Dr. Morales shouted, her voice tinged with desperation. The humans fled, abandoning their equipment, leaving the war dog in the ruins. Outside the chamber, military personnel had already arrived, setting up containment zones around the perimeter. The war dog, now fully awake and enraged, stalked through the ruins, letting out occasional roars that echoed across the landscape. No one dared get close. Every time the war dog approached, soldiers tightened their defenses, setting up barriers, drones hovering above to track its movements. The alien creature didn't seem to care about escape. It was simply trying to destroy anyone who got too close. Hours passed, and still, no one knew how to deal with it. Fear gripped everyone. This war dog had been bred for battle, for annihilation, and its creators had long since vanished, leaving humanity to deal with the aftermath. It was then that one man stepped forward, a veteran soldier who had seen too much destruction in his lifetime. His name was Marcus. While the others watched from a distance, Marcus stood silently, observing the creature's movements. He wasn't like the rest of the soldiers, who only saw the war dog as a threat to be eliminated. He saw something different. In the war dog's eyes, Past the anger and aggression, Marcus recognized something he had seen many times before in his own men during battle: pain. Without a word, Marcus began to approach the war dog slowly, cautiously. He ignored the shouts from his colleagues warning him to stop. His eyes never left the creature as he moved closer. The war dog stopped pacing and growled, its muscles tensing. But Marcus didn't back away. He raised his hands slowly, showing he wasn't a threat. The creature's glowing eyes locked onto him, its growl deepening, but it didn't attack. "I know what you're going through," Marcus murmured, more to himself than the creature. The war dog snarled but stayed in place, watching Marcus with a mixture of suspicion and confusion. It was clear that no one had ever approached it like this before. Marcus took a deep breath, trying to keep his voice steady. "You've lost everything, haven't you? Just like we all have." The war dog's growl faltered for a moment, and it tilted its head slightly as if trying to understand. "They're all gone," Marcus continued, his voice softer now. "The ones you were protecting. But we're not your enemies." He took one more step forward, and to everyone's shock, the war dog didn't move to attack. It simply watched him, as though something in Marcus's words had reached it. The tension was palpable. No one dared breathe as Marcus stood just feet away from the creature. The war dog's gaze softened, ever so slightly, and its growling ceased, replaced by a low, rumbling breath. "That's it," Marcus said quietly. "You're not alone anymore." For the first time since it had awoken, the war dog didn't seem like a mindless weapon. There was a sadness in its eyes now, something that resonated with Marcus on a level he couldn't quite explain. Marcus continued his daily visits to the war dog, ignoring the growing concern from his fellow soldiers. Each day, he approached a little closer, his movements deliberate and calm. The war dog, though still cautious, no longer growled when he neared. It watched him with a wary, intelligent gaze, its massive body tense but no longer hostile. Marcus could sense that the creature was trying to understand him, just as he was trying to understand it. He brought food with him each time, placing it a few feet away before sitting down at a safe distance. The war dog never ate while he was there, but the food always disappeared after he left. It was a small sign of trust, and Marcus clung to it. As the days passed, Marcus spoke to the creature, his voice low and steady. He knew it couldn't understand his words, but he believed it could sense his intentions. He talked about his time in the military, the comrades he had lost, and the battles he had fought. He spoke of the loneliness that followed him after the war, the feeling of being disconnected from a world that no longer made sense. In the war dog's eyes, Marcus saw a reflection of his own pain. "You and I," Marcus said one day, sitting just a few feet away from the creature, "we're not so different. We were made for war, and now there's nothing left but memories." The war dog's eyes flickered, and for a moment, Marcus could almost feel a connection between them. It was subtle, but it was there, a mutual understanding that went beyond words. One evening, after a long day of failed attempts to communicate, Marcus decided to try something different. He brought a small piece of alien tech that the scientists had recovered from the ruins. It was a small, glowing object, something they hadn't been able to identify. Marcus wasn't sure what it did, but he had a hunch it might be familiar to the war dog. He placed it gently on the ground between them, then stepped back. The war dog's eyes narrowed, its nostrils flaring as it sniffed the air. Slowly, cautiously, it approached the object, lowering its massive head to inspect it. For a moment, Marcus held his breath, unsure of how the creature would react. The war dog's paw reached out, touching the device gently. There was a soft hum, and the device lit up, casting a faint glow across the creature's face. Marcus watched as the war dog's posture shifted, its body relaxing ever so slightly. The device seemed to stir something within it, a memory, perhaps, of its long-lost creators. "You remember them, don't you?" Marcus asked softly. "The ones who made you?" The war dog looked at him, and for the first time, there was something other than suspicion in its gaze. There was recognition, of the device, of its past, and perhaps even of the bond it was slowly forming with Marcus. From that day forward, their interactions changed. The war dog no longer saw Marcus as a potential threat. It allowed him to come closer, to sit within arm's reach. Marcus still moved cautiously, but he no longer feared for his safety. He sensed that the war dog had accepted him, though it was still far from trusting anyone else. The other soldiers watched in disbelief as Marcus sat near the war dog, talking to it as though they were old friends. They didn't understand how he had managed to get so close when everyone else had failed. To them, the creature was still a ticking time bomb, a biological weapon that could turn on them at any moment. But Marcus saw something different. He saw a creature that had been bred for war but was now lost without its purpose. One afternoon, as Marcus sat with the war dog, a group of scientists approached, cautiously observing from a distance. They had been studying the creature's behavior since its awakening, but they hadn't dared to approach as closely as Marcus had. "Do you think it remembers them?" one of the scientists asked, watching as the war dog rested its massive head on its paws, its eyes half closed. "I think it remembers everything," Marcus replied, his voice quiet. "It's not just a weapon. It's more than that." The scientists exchanged glances, unsure of how to respond. They had always viewed the war dog as a tool, something to be studied and controlled. But Marcus saw it as a living being, one that had experienced loss and pain just as he had. As the days turned into weeks, Marcus continued to build on the fragile bond he had established with the war dog. He no longer needed to bring food. It would eat while he sat nearby, its wariness slowly fading. Occasionally it would lift its head to watch him, its glowing eyes following his every movement. There was a strange comfort in those moments, a sense of companionship that Marcus hadn't felt in years. One evening, as the sun set behind the distant mountains, casting long shadows across the ruins, Marcus made a bold move. He extended his hand toward the war dog, his heart pounding in his chest. The creature hesitated, its eyes narrowing as it considered his gesture. For what felt like an eternity, Marcus remained still, his hand outstretched, waiting. Finally, the war dog leaned forward, its massive head lowering until its snout brushed against Marcus's palm. Its breath was warm, its fur surprisingly soft beneath the armored plating. Marcus exhaled slowly, relief flooding through him. He had done it. He had earned the war dog's trust, something no one else had been able to do. The creature's eyes closed for a brief moment, and Marcus could feel the weight of its ancient sorrow, its loneliness. "You're not alone anymore," Marcus whispered, his voice barely audible. The war dog's eyes opened again, and this time, there was a softness in its gaze that hadn't been there before. It was still a warrior, still a biological weapon bred for destruction, but in that moment, it was also something more. It was a creature capable of understanding, of forming bonds, and perhaps even of finding peace. Marcus lowered his hand, sitting quietly beside the war dog as the last light of day faded into darkness. They sat in silence, two warriors from different worlds, bound by a shared understanding. The war dog had finally found someone who saw it for what it truly was, and Marcus had found a companion who understood the pain of war in a way no human ever could. In the distance, the soldiers and scientists continued to watch, but Marcus paid them no mind. For the first time in a long time, he felt like he wasn't alone. The days of cautious peace were shattered when the alarms sounded across the camp. Marcus stood next to the war dog, watching the horizon as military personnel scrambled into action. A massive ship descended from the sky, casting a shadow over the ruins. It wasn't human. The sleek, predatory design was unmistakable. The invaders had come. The same ones that had wiped out the war dog's creators. The war dog's reaction was immediate. Its posture changed, ears flat against its head, teeth bared in a low, menacing growl. It recognized them. The very beings it had been created to destroy were now here, on this planet, threatening a new people. Marcus could feel the tension radiating from the creature. Its instincts screamed for battle, for blood. But he couldn't let it charge blindly into a fight it didn't fully understand. "Easy, easy," Marcus muttered, though he knew the war dog's aggression wasn't something he could talk down this time. It was bred for this, designed to confront this very enemy. The creature's mind was already set, the need for vengeance stirring deep within its programmed memory. The first blast from the alien ship hit the outskirts of the camp, sending up a plume of dust and debris. Soldiers shouted, weapons raised, but they were outclassed. The alien invaders, sleek in their advanced armor, descended from the ship, weapons glowing with strange, alien energy. They moved with precision, coordinated, and relentless. "Fall back!" the commander yelled, but Marcus knew retreat wouldn't save them. He turned to the war dog, whose eyes were now locked on the descending invaders. This was what it had been waiting for. All the centuries of slumber, the rage it had built up, this was the fight it had been created to win. "Not yet," Marcus said, stepping in front of the war dog, holding up his hand as if he could stop the tide of anger swelling in the creature's chest. "We need a plan." The war dog growled, impatient. Its eyes flicked toward the advancing aliens, their weapons firing in bursts that cut down soldiers like wheat. But Marcus wasn't going to let the creature charge headlong into a death trap. These aliens were powerful, more advanced than anything Earth had ever faced. "We can't beat them like this," Marcus muttered, more to himself than to the war dog. "We need to think like them." The war dog paced, its claws digging into the ground. It understood battle tactics, instinctively built to analyze and adapt. But it wasn't used to having a human partner. Marcus realized, in that moment, that he needed to change the way they fought. The war dog's raw power, combined with human strategy, could be the key to surviving this invasion. "We'll flank them," Marcus said, eyes scanning the battlefield. "They're too focused on the soldiers up front. We hit them from the side, where they won't expect it." The war dog's growl deepened, but this time, it wasn't one of frustration. It understood. It had always been more than just a mindless weapon. It was a strategist in its own right. Marcus had just unlocked that potential, guiding its rage with precision. As the alien invaders advanced, cutting through the defensive lines, Marcus and the war dog circled around, using the ruins for cover. The war dog moved silently despite its massive frame, its eyes locked on the enemy, its body coiled for attack. The first strike came swift and brutal. The war dog lunged from the shadows, its claws ripping through the armor of the nearest alien soldier. The creature barely had time to react before it was torn apart. The others turned, but they were too slow. Marcus, rifle in hand, picked off the remaining soldiers, working in perfect sync with the war dog. For the first time, the invaders were caught off guard. They hadn't expected such a coordinated assault from the humans and their unlikely ally. The alien ship, looming overhead, began to fire in their direction, trying to pin them down. But Marcus had anticipated this. He moved with purpose, guiding the war dog toward the ship's blind spots. Together, they dodged the blasts, closing the distance between them and the ship. As they neared the ship's base, Marcus could see an opening, a weak point in the alien defense. "There," he whispered, pointing. The war dog needed no further instruction. It charged, leaping high into the air, its claws digging into the ship's hull. With a powerful swipe, it tore through the metal plating, exposing the vulnerable interior. Marcus followed, slipping through the breach as the war dog tore apart the ship's defenses. Inside, the alien crew scrambled, unprepared for the onslaught. Marcus took down the pilots with precision shots, while the war dog ripped through anything that stood in its way. The ship's power began to fail, systems shutting down one by one as Marcus and the war dog destroyed its core. The once invincible alien war machine was now crumbling under the combined force of human strategy and alien power. But the fight wasn't over yet. Outside, more invaders were closing in, realizing their ship was compromised. Marcus glanced at the war dog, now covered in the wreckage of the battle, its breathing heavy but its eyes still fierce. "We're not done," Marcus said, gripping his weapon. "We finish this together." The war dog let out a low growl, its gaze locked on the remaining invaders. It was no longer fighting alone, no longer a relic of a lost civilization. Now, it had a new mission, a new purpose. The remaining invaders, seeing the destruction of their ship, regrouped, preparing for a final assault. But Marcus and the war dog were ready. They moved as one, cutting through the alien forces with brutal efficiency. The war dog's claws were a blur, tearing through armor and flesh, while Marcus's shots found their mark with deadly accuracy. The tide of battle had turned. The invaders, once so sure of their victory, now faltered under the relentless assault. They hadn't counted on facing a creature like the war dog, and they certainly hadn't expected it to fight alongside a human. By the time the last alien soldier fell, the battlefield was silent. The invaders had been wiped out, their ship destroyed, their forces decimated. Marcus stood next to the war dog, both of them covered in the aftermath of the battle, breathing hard but alive. For a long moment neither moved. The war dog's glowing eyes scanned the horizon, searching for any remaining threats. But there were none. The battle was over. The battlefield was silent, but Marcus knew it wasn't over yet. The victory had been hard-won, but the cost weighed heavily. Bodies of both human and alien invaders lay scattered across the ruins. The war dog stood beside him, its breathing heavy, blood matted into its fur and armor. It didn't roar in triumph, it simply watched, waiting for the next threat. But this time, Marcus could feel something different, a shared understanding that this fight had been theirs together. Marcus lowered his weapon and took a deep breath, wiping the sweat and grime from his face. The war dog's eyes flicked toward him, its posture less rigid, almost calm. There was no more rage in its gaze, only a quiet acknowledgement that the battle was over, for now. Marcus could tell that the creature understood the significance of what they had done together. They had fought side by side, not as weapon and master, but as partners, bound by the need to survive. The remaining military forces began to regroup, securing the area and tending to the wounded. The alien invaders had been defeated, their ship lying in ruins, but no one could shake the feeling that this was just the beginning of something far larger. The invaders had come with purpose, and though they had been repelled here, Marcus knew more would come. This war wasn't over, and Earth would need every advantage it could get. The commander approached Marcus, her face a mix of awe and disbelief as she looked at the war dog standing peacefully beside him. "I can't believe you tamed that thing," she said, shaking her head. "It should have torn us all apart, but instead, you two saved us." Marcus glanced at the war dog, then back at the commander. "It was never just a mindless weapon. It's more than that. We didn't tame it. We understood each other." The commander nodded, still cautious. "What happens now? With the war dog?" Marcus hadn't thought that far ahead. He looked at the war dog, its massive frame now at ease but still alert, its eyes scanning the horizon for any remaining threats. It could easily disappear into the wilds of the planet or be taken back to Earth as a relic, a tool to study or weaponize. But that didn't seem right. This creature had fought for its masters once, long ago, and now it had chosen to fight for something more. "I don't think it belongs in a lab or a cage," Marcus said quietly. "It's earned the right to choose its own path." The commander studied him for a moment before nodding. "You're right. It's not our place to decide its fate. But it's clear we need allies like it for what's coming. These invaders aren't done, and we're not ready for them." Marcus turned back to the war dog, stepping closer. He could feel the weight of its gaze on him, something almost resembling gratitude or acceptance. It had lost everything once, its creators, its purpose. But now, there was a new mission. Marcus had no doubt the war dog would fight again, not because it had been programmed to, but because it wanted to protect something. "We've got a lot of work ahead of us," Marcus said, resting a hand on the war dog's armored neck. The creature didn't flinch or pull away. It simply stood, solid and resolute, as though waiting for his next move. "But we'll be ready." The war dog let out a low rumble, a sound that was neither a growl nor a roar, but something in between, a quiet promise. Marcus knew what it meant. They had fought together, and they would fight again. The creature wasn't just a biological weapon. It had become something more, an ally, a protector. And in the process, Marcus had found something he hadn't realized he was missing, a new purpose, a reason to keep fighting. The sun began to set behind the distant mountains, casting long shadows across the battlefield. Soldiers moved about, securing the site, but the tension had finally lifted. Marcus and the war dog stood together, watching the sky, knowing that this was only the beginning of a much larger conflict. The invaders had come for the planet, but they hadn't counted on what they would face: the combined strength of human resilience and the war dog's raw power. "You've got my back, right?" Marcus asked, half smiling as he looked at the war dog. The creature met his gaze, its glowing eyes steady, and for a brief moment, Marcus could have sworn it nodded. It was a silent agreement, one forged in the heat of battle and sealed with mutual respect. As the last light faded, Marcus knew they couldn't stay on the planet forever. The war dog couldn't remain in the ruins of its old life, and neither could he. There was too much at stake, too many battles left to fight. The invaders would be back, and when they returned, Earth would need every weapon it could muster, both man and beast. Marcus took one last look at the shattered alien ship, the bodies of the invaders scattered around it. They had underestimated humanity, underestimated the power of a bond forged through shared struggle. That was their mistake, and it wouldn't be the last one they made. "We're going home," Marcus said, turning toward the war dog, his voice firm. "But this time, we're going as a team." The war dog let out a low rumble in response, falling into step beside him. Together, they walked toward the military transport, ready for whatever came next. The commander called out orders to prepare for departure, but Marcus didn't hear her. His focus was on the path ahead, the battles yet to be fought. He had found something more than just a mission. He had found a partner in the most unlikely of places. And now, they would face whatever threats came their way, together. There was no going back. As they boarded the transport, Marcus felt a sense of determination settle over him. He wasn't alone anymore, and neither was the war dog. They had each other, and that was more than enough. The ship's engines roared to life, lifting off from the ruined battlefield, leaving the broken alien ship behind. But as they rose into the sky, Marcus knew that this fight was far from over. The war wasn't done, and the invaders would be back, stronger and more prepared. But this time, so would they.